Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering my pick for the best Star Druid build in Baldur's Gate 3. The Circle of the Stars Druid is like Druid, but more so. You add your incredible class features to all of the things that Druids already want to do, giving you even more versatility and power to beef up Druid's already phenomenal arsenal. This character has one of the best early games in the entire game, and a lot of honor mode runs are lost in the first few levels. Star Druid makes that vastly less likely to happen. You also come with an excellent mid-game power spike and an amazing late game. So no matter what level you are, no matter what your party composition, no matter what your plan is for honor mode, a Star Druid will always make it easier and smoother. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Robert Young for the $10 donation, Tarantula for the $10, and Sean Allen, Bill DeHora, and David Hines for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. It really means a lot to me. Alright, let's build some star power. I'm using Jaheira as the example character because of course this is a Druid build and she's the Druid of the party, but also I think that Star Druid fits Jaheira maybe better than any of the other Druid subclasses available in Baldur's Gate 3. Star Druid's mixture of utility, control, and support fits very well for the wise mentor figure that Jaheira is in BG3, and allows her to use her combination of wisdom and knowledge to guide these less experienced adventurers to success, making them better at everything that they try to do. If you're building this as a custom character, what race you pick mostly is not going to impact the build significantly. This character gets all of the weapon and armor proficiencies that you need from your class levels, so you don't need those from your race, though there are still some that can give you significant bonuses. Gnome's advantage on mental saving throws combines incredibly well with your dragon form's ability to succeed on concentration saves, meaning that you'll almost never fail an important saving throw if you're playing as a gnome. Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf gets bonus movement speed, which is useful for every single character, and Githyanki gets once per day Misty Step, which gives you a great panic button and prevents you from having to spend a gear slot on learning Misty Step, a spell that every character should have access to. High Elf or High Half Elf are also pretty excellent for this character, because we will be making melee attacks in the early game, and while Jaheira can't be respec'd to remove Firebolt, if you build a custom High Elf or High Half Elf, you can take Booming Blade as your one wizard cantrip, which is basically a huge free damage boost to every melee attack that you make throughout the entire game, so any character that even makes the occasional melee attack can benefit massively from being a Half Elf, a High Half Elf, or High Elf. Finally, one race that is still excellent, but less impactful for this build than for many is Halfling. Halfling's ability to reroll ones is obviously amazing for every character, but for this character, we already can't roll ones on our concentration saves, which is one of the most important things to reroll critical failures on. So while Halfling's ability is still excellent for the Star Druid, it is less impactful than for other concentration-based casters. Still a great choice, but not as important as it would be for other characters. I'll be focusing on a monoclass Star Druid for this build, which is in fact one of the most powerful ways to build Star Druid, but I should mention that if you are planning to multiclass this character, many of the best multiclasses you want to begin with at first level. One level of Cleric can get you Life Cleric for heavy armor proficiency and a vast increase to your already powerful healing abilities. 2 levels of Paladin can get you Smite to make you a potent threat in melee. A level of Wizard can get you access to all of the Wizard spellcasting. A level of Sorcerer can get you Constitution save proficiency, meaning it's basically impossible for you to fail concentration saves, and also improve your defenses by giving you the Shield spell and Magic Missile for more reliable damage. And similarly, a level of Fighter can make you much better defensively, and also give you con save proficiency. Rogue or Bard can give you a bunch of skills, so Star Druid has a lot of multi-classing options, most of which are 1-level dips taken at level 1, but for this build, we're going to start with Druid. For our cantrip selection, normally I would suggest on a Druid taking Shillelagh and Guidance. Shillelagh is your best tool in the early game, allowing you to make melee weapon attacks very effectively. It turns any staff or club into a D8 base damage weapon. A club, for example, can be a torch, which does a d4 of damage, and if lit, does another d4 of fire damage. The Shillelagh spell turns that into a d8 of damage, plus a d4 of fire damage, plus your wisdom. A d8 plus a d4 is 7 average damage, which is the same damage that a fighter with a greatsword is doing at first level. So this character, despite being a pure spellcaster with all of the power that entails, and using a one-handed weapon, can do equivalent damage to a fighter with your melee attacks if you're using Shillelagh and a torch. This is obviously an incredibly powerful tool that makes your early game vastly smoother, so Shillelagh is always a great pick for any druid. Normally you would take Guidance here, because Guidance is basically mandatory. It's the best spell in Baldur's Gate and just makes every single thing that you do in the game so much easier. But Star Druids get it for free at level 2, so we don't need to take it at level 1. For that reason, we're going to take Thorn Whip, which is a decent ranged option that also has a ton of utility for repositioning enemies and can do a bunch of extra damage with effects like spike growth, or, for example, Booming Blade if we took that with our half-elf levels. You could actually still take Guidance at level 1 if you're building this character as a custom character, because it can be helpful on the first couple skill checks on the Nautiloid before you rescue Shadowheart, but then you would want to respec at later levels to get rid of it because we're going to get it for free, so it's somewhat redundant. For our ability score selection, druids only care about one stat really, which is wisdom, or what's called single attribute dependent, or SAD. And as I always say, it's bad to be mad, but it's rad to be sad. And that lets us get away with the highest possible attribute split for the 3 most important attributes in the game. We get to take 17 wisdom, and we're going to take 16 in dexterity, and then 15 in constitution. If you really care about getting like 1 point of strength early, you can take a 16, 14, 16, and 12 strength split, but just for simplicity's sake, because you'll be respecing to this stat spread, as soon as you get your first ASI, we will be taking just these 3 attributes at the highest values possible. This lets us have really great con saves, which works well with our dragon form to never lose concentration on a spell, and the highest possible wisdom, as well as win initiative, very frequently. Druids, of course, want to win initiative as often as possible because they have excellent control spells and great supporting abilities, so going first allows you to buff your allies before their turns and debuff your enemies before their turns, or prevent them from getting turns entirely. For our skill proficiencies here, the only thing that really matters is that you take Perception. Druids are a wisdom-based character and get Perception as an available class skill, which is awesome. Getting Perception means that you do not have to worry about traps, because you'll be able to find them more easily. Every party should have as many characters as possible with decent perception rolls as possible to just make disarming traps much smoother. Even if you've played Honor Mode a bunch of times and have memorized the location of all the traps, this is still much easier. The other one that I'm going to recommend taking, because of a change in patch 8, is Survival. In patch 8, I have heard, though I've still found it possible, but some people are finding that you can no longer dig up treasure chests with a shovel without succeeding on the survival check. So taking survival actually gets you those random treasure chests if you're encountering that issue. In my testing, I was still able to dig them up, but I've seen a lot of people mentioning this, so take survival for safety and you'll get the random treasure chests for sure. Other than that, no decisions that we have to make at level 1, so let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we get to take our subclass, and of course the subclass that we are taking is Circle of the Stars. This gives us a ton of abilities right away. So firstly, just like every other druid, we get these wild shape forms. Now often we're going to want to spend our wild shape charges on assuming these starry forms, which we'll talk about in a second, but the wild shape forms for druid at level 2 are still incredibly powerful, so don't forget that you have these. Even as a Circle of the Stars druid, which isn't focused on wild shape, this can give you an entire second hit point bar, because enemies have to reduce your wild shape hit points to 0 and then your actual humanoid hit points to 0 in order to kill you. So, assuming, for example, Spider Form takes your HP more than doubles your effective hit points, and also are potent combat tools in the early game. Spider Form comes with free crowd control and great damage and so on, and also give you a lot of utility in terms of movement abilities and everything. So don't forget that Wild Shape exists. Even if this build isn't focused around it, it's still an incredibly powerful tool in your arsenal. The other things that we get at level 1 include the guidance, or at level 2, include the Guidance cantrip, of course, great spell to get for free, and obviously we're very, very happy to have that. And we learn Guiding Bolt as a spell known. which is a pretty nice damage spell. Druids don't have a lot of direct damage at early levels, so Guiding Bolt on Star Druid just gives you a significant increase to your damage capabilities. In addition to that, we get to cast Guiding Bolt for free using these star map charges, and at level 2 we get 2 of them, so twice per day we can cast a free Guiding Bolt without spending a spell slot. This is a huge increase to our damage output per day, and makes this character a potent threat both in melee, whether we're using a wild shape form or shillelagh'd attacks, and at range, using ranged attacks like Guiding Bolt, and of course our powerful control and damaging spells that we get as a druid. Finally, of course, we get the starry forms. These consume a wild shape charge and a bonus action, and last all day, so you don't have to swap out of them or anything, and give you a benefit passively as well as an active ability for most of them. So, first, there are 3 possible forms. The first of these is Starry Form Archer. While you're in Archer form, you can use a bonus action to do an attack roll with a d8 plus your wisdom modifier in radiant damage at 60-foot range. This is basically an entire bow shot. If you had an Archer character, this is the same damage they would be doing with their actual attack. You get it as a bonus action all day, every day, as much as you want. So this is a very powerful boost to your party's damage per turn, and lets you use your bonus action, something that you don't have a huge demand on in the early game especially, in order to just increase your damage output. So very, very powerful and generically very strong form. You'll probably spend more time in the other 2 forms, but Archer form is great for any battle that takes place at range. Of course, you can use Guiding Bolt, hit the Guiding Bolt, and then make this Archer form attack with advantage because you have the Guiding Bolt advantage, so you can use both of these in the same turn for even more benefit. The second of these is Chalice form. Chalice form lets you add free healing to every time you spend a spell on healing. So anytime you cast a healing spell that uses a spell slot, you can use Chalice healing in addition to that as a free action. It says bonus action, but that's to enter Chalice form, not to activate the Chalice healing. Chalice healing just happens for free. This does a d8 plus 3 plus your wisdom modifier in healing to any creature within a 30-foot range. So basically doubles the effectiveness of all of your healing spells. You can use this either as a bonus action with Healing Word, or as a standard action with Cure Wounds. So this character can benefit from Chalice healing in either way. Finally, we get Dragon form, which is the one that we're probably going to spend most of our time in for at least the late game. Often in the early game, Chalice form is going to be better, but Dragon form is going to be better in the late game, which lets you effectively gives you the Rogue level 10 ability, Reliable Talent, at level 2 for a much more important thing, concentration saves. Whenever you roll a concentration save, you always get a minimum of 10. You can't critically fail on them, and you always get at least 10. So when you're taking small amounts of damage, you will auto-succeed every concentration save. When you take large amounts of damage, you're still going to succeed most of the time. That's a great passive, but in addition to that, you also get a bonus action once per turn to create basically a Dragon Breath for 2d6 plus your wisdom and radiant damage. Enemies can dex save for half, but it will always do at least some damage, so this is 100% reliable damage as a bonus action, and it's AoE damage, and it's a lot of damage in the early game. So Dazzling Breath every turn, plus melee attacks in the early game with your shillelagh, makes this character an incredible early game damage dealer, both to groups of enemies and to single targets. So Starry Form Dragon is your typical offensive form in the early game, and Chalice is more if you want to focus on healing. Finally, for our prepared spells at this level, we're always going to be taking Healing Word, which is Druid's a critically important spell for Druid. It's amazing if we're in Chalice form, because we get to double up on it, but excellent even if we're not in Chalice form. We'll also take Entangle. This is our best concentration spell at early levels and can completely disable enemies, preventing them from acting entirely. After that, we have a couple more choices. Longstrider is important for every party. Now, you can have a character sit at your camp and cast this, but if you want a character in your party to cast this is a great character to do that. It doesn't cost spell slots when used outside of combat, lasts all day, gives your whole party 10 feet of extra movement speed, just an incredible spell overall. For our combat spells, we already have Guiding Bolt as a non-concentration damage spell, but I recommend taking Ice Knife anyways, because Ice Knife can provide the ice surface on the ground, so it does damage and also provides crowd control effects. An enemy on an ice surface who falls over on their turn loses the rest of their turn, so this can basically be a stun, an AoE stun in addition to damage. The last spell is going to depend on what Starry form you're spending most of your time in. If you are in Chalice form and playing this character more as a healer, you're going to want Cure Wounds. This is because we can activate Chalice form both with a bonus action and with an action if we have Cure Wounds, so you can use Chalice form in order to do a ton of healing, and you can mix and match which action you're using to activate it depending on whether you have a bonus action that you want to do or something along those lines. So Cure Wounds is very, very useful for a character with that's spending its time in Chalice form. If you're not in Chalice form, Cure Wounds is not worth taking, and in that case, we would take a more generally applicable combat spell like Thunder Wave, or Enhance Sleep, another ritual spell that can boost our whole party before we go into a fight and give them a bunch of extra mobility. Since I think we're going to be spending most of the early game in Dragon form, at least until we get all the buff on heal items, I'm going to recommend preparing Thunder Wave or Fog Cloud here as a combat spell, but I did want to mention that Cure Wounds is very good if you're spending more of your time healing. At character level 3, we get access to second level spells, and our second level spells are going to boost our combat capabilities enormously. Firstly, Spike Growth is just a game-winning spell. It's a concentration spell, but the amount of damage that it does is ridiculous. It completely wins a lot of early game encounters where enemies don't have easy ways to get out of it, and they'll take a ton of damage. It slows and obliterates melee enemies. It's a huge AoE, so Spike Growth, just an amazing spell. Secondly, for our other concentration spell, we're going to be taking Moonbeam. Moonbeam is the highest damage that you can get from a level 2 spell slot of any spell. It does 2d10 radiant damage, but it does, which is an average of 11 damage, but it does it both when you cast it on the creature and when they start their turn, so it's basically 22 damage if they fail both their con saves. This is more damage than the 21 average damage that Scorching Rays does, or the 20 average damage that Cloud of Daggers does, so it's the highest damage spell at level 2. A great spell option to have for a druid. We don't need 3 concentration spells, though, and Spike Growth will typically be Entangle, but better in most circumstances where Entangle is good, or 3 concentration control spells. So instead of Spike Growth, we're still going to take a concentration spell, but it'll be Flaming Sphere, because this can absorb enemy attacks, so if we want to redirect enemy attacks, then we have this option. This gives us the 3 most powerful concentration spells, depending on whether we want a control spell, a defensive option to absorb damage, or an offensive option, as well as our non-concentration options with Ice Knife and Guiding Bolt. At level 4, we get to take our first feat, and here, as often in Honor Mode, we have a choice. We can either take an ability score improvement to even out these odd numbers, get our con up to increase our hit points and make our concentration saves even better, and of course increase our wisdom to improve everything that we're doing, or we can take alert. On Honor Mode, pretty much the most important thing that you can do is go first before the enemies, because if you go first, enemies often do not get a chance to go second. So for Honor Mode runs, I would recommend taking Alert. Of course, it won't hurt your character significantly to take the ability score improvement if you really just want to improve your basic stats and get rid of these odd numbers, but getting the ability to go before pretty much every enemy in the game with a +8 initiative modifier is incredibly powerful for Honor Mode runs, and will make your run significantly smoother. For our cantrip selection at this level, we're going to pick up Resistance. Resistance is very useful for pretty much any situation where you know that you have a saving throw coming up. For example, if there's a story event that causes your character to make saving throws, having a character with resistance in your party will make you more likely to succeed on those. Combined with the die roll manipulation that we get at later levels, this makes this character excellent at succeeding on scripted saves, so Resistance will be able to apply as well as our omens that we will get at later levels, and so that will give us an additional bonus to succeeding on saves. At level 5, we get yet another massive power spike with access to 3rd level spells, which, as for every other spellcaster for a Star Druid, makes us significantly more powerful. We also get an additional star map, which gets us the ability to cast Guiding Bolt a third time per day. Now, the Guiding Bolts that you get from the star maps don't scale. You can't upcast them at higher levels, so you won't be using these as frequently, but they're still a nice default combat action if you don't have anything better to do. Even a level 1 Guiding Bolt at level 5 is still a pretty relevant spell, so even though these fall off throughout the game, they don't cost you any significant resource. They don't take a spell slot, so you're still going to be using these pretty frequently. For our prepared spells at this level, now that we have access to 3rd level spells, we get to add in a couple more extremely powerful control spells. The first of these is Sleet Storm, which creates a gigantic ice surface. Ice surfaces, as we've already talked about, are one of the most powerful things that you can do to control enemies in Baldur's Gate 3. An enemy who walks on an ice surface has a chance of falling over, and if they fall over on their turn, they lose the rest of their turn. That means if an enemy uses its movement before its action and falls prone on the Sleet Storm surface, it effectively just got stunned and lost its entire turn, and most enemies will move before they act. So this is a very, very powerful control spell and will outright win a lot of fights. The second is Plant Growth. Plant Growth is a non-concentration giant area that reduces enemy movement speed to a quarter. If you have a way to prevent enemies from jumping, like blinding them with Hunger of Hadar, Plant Growth can be one of the most devastating control spells in the game. It basically completely removes melee enemies from combat with 1/4 movement speed. They can't do anything, and will keep them in your AoE control or damaging spells for much, much longer. It doesn't cost your concentration, so you can use Plant Growth alongside another concentration spell in order to keep enemies from ever acting while also constantly doing damage to them with something like a Moonbeam, for example. At level 5 also, the utility of Flaming Sphere has dropped a little bit. It's still a pretty useful spell, but the amount of health that it has means that enemies will be killing it much faster by the time you're level 5. So we're going to drop that from our spell list and add Call Lightning. Call Lightning is especially good for a Star Druid because it gives you a great damaging action. Reactivating Call Lightning takes your action, does a bunch of great damage, can be doubled by getting enemies wet with Create Water, for example, or throwing a water bottle at them. And then also we have our bonus action to activate our Dragon Breath or our Chalice Healing if we want to use a bonus action for Healing Word. So this just means that we only have to spend a single 3rd level spell slot and have 10 turns worth of amazing actions. So even for longer fights, Call Lightning will give us something great to do every single turn. When we're in dragon form, of course, we won't lose concentration on it, so we will always have access to it. So it's very synergistic with Star Druid, especially if your party is getting enemies wet and doing extra damage with ice and lightning damage. At level 6, we get the next of our amazing Star Druid features, and this one's a little bit easy to overlook, but is a very, very powerful class feature. So, we get the Cosmic Omen abilities. Whenever we long rest, we get randomly, a 50% chance of each happening, an Omen of Weal or Woe. This gives us the ability to use our reaction to basically do a bardic inspiration or a cutting words like a lore bard or another bard. You can increase or decrease attack rolls and saving throws. So if you have the Omen of Weal, you can increase your allies' attack rolls or saving throws and increase their ability checks, so it makes them even better at succeeding on skill checks. You can rest until you get a Weal Omen before you do an important skill check, like the Mirror of Loss, for example, in Act 3. And with the Woe Omen, then you can reduce enemy attack rolls and reduce enemy saving throws. It doesn't say here in the tooltip, but it is a d6. So it's basically like a cutting words that you get. But lore bards get cutting words as a sort of major class feature that they spend a lot of their class power on. Star Druids get this just as a nice bonus to all of the other awesome things that we're already doing. Die roll manipulation is incredibly powerful, and the ability to prevent an enemy attack from hitting you or cause an enemy to fail a super important saving throw cannot be overstated how powerful it is. If you are long resting repeatedly to get the better of Weal or Woe, I recommend going for Woe. It will generally be more useful to reduce enemy die rolls than to increase your own, because it gives you just more control and more agency over what happens. Your characters should already have high enough bonuses to succeed on most of their checks anyways, so decreasing enemy bonuses can mean that you succeed on locking them down with powerful control spells, or prevent them from landing attacks at times when you would want them to avoid that. This is a super powerful ability, and also gives us a great use for our reaction, which up to this point, we didn't have an excellent use for our reaction, because druids don't get a lot of reaction-based effects. Now we have a great use for our reaction, so we're using every resource in combat. As I've mentioned in previous videos, in every turn, D&D characters get 5 key resources. Those are your action, your bonus action, your concentration, your reaction, and your movement. And now that we have Cosmic Omen, Star Druids have some of the best uses for all of them every single turn of combat. We have Cosmic Omen as a reaction, we have our great bonus actions from our star form, our actions are obviously great as well, because we can, at worst, cast a Guiding Bolt, but also just cast super powerful spells. Our concentration is excellent because we're a druid, we have some of the best concentration spells in the game, and our movement is always useful to help position ourselves. So this character makes the maximum possible usage of every resource available to it. At character level 7, we get access to 4th level spells, and while for most other spellcasters, 4th level spells are typically not a massive increase to your power level, because most spellcasters don't have the best options at level 4 spells. Druids, on the other hand, have some of the best level 4 spells in the game, and get yet another enormous power spike when you get access to these spells. There's a lot of important spells at this level. We actually want more than we can feasibly take here, but let me talk about how each of these is useful. Wall of Fire just wins certain encounters on its own. Any encounter where there's enemies in a narrow hallway, or they're forced to come towards you, like certain encounters in Act 2, for example, channeling those enemies through the Wall of Fire can just auto-win the encounter because they'll take so much damage as they approach you. Ice Storm is a large AoE, non-concentration ice surface, so it's similar to Sleet Storm, but doesn't take your concentration, and does a bunch of damage when you first cast it. Ice surfaces, as I've talked about, remain excellent for all of the reasons that we've already discussed. Conjure Woodland Being is probably the best summon in the game for the spell slot that it costs. It creates 2 summons, each of which have their own whole spell list. So, Conjure Woodland Being gives you a massive number of abilities. The aura from the Dryad also lets you walk on spike growth and stuff without hurting yourself, and it gives you the ability to cast Entangle. It gives you a Wood Woad who can tank and also cast additional abilities. They can entangle enemies with melee attacks. Conjure Woodland Being is a key component of any summoning build, and this character can use them even better than other characters because you have so much healing, so you can keep them alive more easily using your Chalice form, and you have a lot of easy ways to increase their effectiveness by giving them advantage with Guiding Bolts, for example. So Conjure Woodland Being excellent for a Star Druid. You have some more situational spells as well. Confusion is a great AoE control spell that doesn't hit your allies, so if you and your allies are if you and your enemies are kind of tangled up in melee, you can hit them all with a Confusion. You have Freedom of Movement, which can be used as a panic button to break an ally out of stun, and Grasping Vine, which is a bonus action non-concentration summon. Since the buff, it's actually a pretty useful spell that can be used to slow and entangle enemies, draw their attacks, and pull them onto dangerous surfaces, so don't underestimate this ability. You may not have ever seen it cast because it used to be terrible, but it was buffed, so now it's actually pretty good. For a kind of default spell list at this level, I would recommend adding in Conjure Woodland Being and Wall of Fire. However, you're probably going to want to swap your spells pretty frequently at this level, your prepared spells pretty frequently, depending on what encounters you're facing. There are lots of different options that will be very effective, so changing your spell list, which you can do anytime out of combat as a prepared spellcaster in Baldur's Gate 3, is a very important tool in your arsenal, and one that you should be using pretty frequently. At character level 8, we get our second feat, and this is a very easy one. We're just going to go ahead and grab an ability score improvement and even out these odd numbers. If you took the ASI at level 4, then you should take alert at level 8. Trying to play Act 3 without alert is certainly possible if you stack enough initiative gear or use vigilance elixirs on your character, but going before enemies is so valuable. My general rule of thumb is that in Act 3, you want all of your characters to have between +8 and +10 initiative, depending on what initiative gear you have available, and that will guarantee you go before all but the very fastest enemies. A lot of Act 3 enemies have alert themselves, so making certain that you have this for the end game will make your run much, much smoother and much less likely to fail. But of course, we took it at level 4 because of all of the reasons I just mentioned, so we're going to take an ability score improvement to make our character have more hit points, better concentration saves, and increased wisdom to make our spellcasting even more effective. At character level 9, we get 5th level spells, which include some pretty excellent ones, although the 5th level spell that we're going to use the most often will actually be casting with a 6th level spell slot. We also, from our Star Druid, get an additional Star Map for a 4th use of Guiding Bolt every day, and an additional Cosmic Omen for a 4th use of Cosmic Omen every day, so we can use these abilities even more liberally and even more frequently. The main spell that we get that's great at level 5 is Conjure Elemental. This is an excellent spell at level 5 and an incredible spell at level 6 when we can summon the Myrmidons using it. So usually your 6th level spell slot on a Druid is going to be an upcasted Conjure Elemental for a Myrmidon. Depending on your party composition, you may use different ones of these. But in general, the Water Myrmidon is still the best, even though they've removed the ability of healing vapors to get every enemy wet. The Water Myrmidon is just a generically very powerful creature, but I encourage you to experiment with all 8 of the possible summons from Conjure Elemental, because they all have their uses in different circumstances and depending on your party composition. For prepared spells at this level, we're going to add Conjure Elemental in, and then we're going to go back and grab a utility spell from an earlier level. There's a bunch of different options that we can pick up here that will all be very useful, and at this point you should have a good idea of what your party needs. Hold Person to get guaranteed critical hits with melee damage, Create Water if you don't have other ways to do that at this point, Freedom of Movement for a panic button if you're allies are getting stunned frequently. All of these are excellent choices. I'm going to grab Hold Person because it's just very useful to just one-shot bosses in the late game, given how high your damage can get. But there's a lot of different options that we could pick up here, and this should give you a pretty well-rounded spell list that fills every need that your party has. Then, at character level 10, we get access to the improved Starry Forms. So, with the improved Starry Forms, we get an additional d8 damage to our Archer form. So instead of shooting for a d8 plus our Wisdom, we're shooting for 2d8 plus our Wisdom in Radiant damage. That's a pretty decent amount of damage, even at level 10 as a bonus action, so definitely still worth using in encounters that take place at really long range. Chalice healing goes up to 2d8 plus our Wisdom. At this level, healing is less for the amount of hit points that you're regaining and more to apply the buff on heal items, so you're probably not spending as much time in Chalice form, but if you are, then it's very useful, and we will sometimes use it anyways because of another thing that we get at this level. And Dragon form gets a flying movement speed of 20 feet. At this level, you should probably have your mobility tools more or less sorted out, so a 20-foot fly speed is not that exciting, but it is a nice little bonus, and it's basically free. We're going to be spending most of our time in Dragon form anyways, so we're pretty happy to have this. The other thing that you get that is not mentioned in this tooltip at all is the ability to freely swap, without spending a wild shape charge, between your Starry forms once per turn. So you can use, for example, a Chalice healing ability, swap to, and then swap to Dragon form, use the Dragon ability, and then remain in Dragon form. So you can kind of double up on your abilities. Now, both the Dragon and Archer form abilities require you to use a bonus action. So unless you have a second bonus action from some source, you can't use both of them in a turn. But you can use both Chalice and either of the other two in a turn, or use one of them and then go back to Dragon form to maintain concentration on whatever spell you're concentrating on, so you can make a ranged attack with Archer form, and then sit in Dragon form during the enemy's turn to maintain concentration. Very, very powerful tool, and you will be swapping between your forms often, both to double up on them and to make sure you're always in the correct form for the situation at hand. We also get an additional cantrip, and since, tragically, druids can't take True Strike to annoy people in the YouTube comments, we're going to grab Poison Spray, which is the next most useless spell, because, of course, at this level, our cantrip doesn't matter. At level 11, we get 6th level spells, and Druid 6th level spells are some of the best in the game. So firstly, of course, we get Summon Conjure Elemental. We get the Myrmidon Upcast of Conjure Elemental, which is what our 6th level spell slot is usually going to be used for. But there are lots of ways in the game to refresh our spell slots. In addition to that, we get Hero's Feast, which is another amazing day-long buff. One of the best uses for a Druid 6th level spell slots, if you're refreshing them, is to summon a Myrmidon and then cast Hero's Feast to give your entire party this massive benefit for the entire day. We also get an amazing combat spell. Wall of Thorns gives you a large AoE damage spell that creates difficult terrain, but that quarters enemy movement speed and does damage. So it's basically a wall of fire, a spike growth, and a plant growth all combined into a single spell. This is an encounter winning spell, which of course you want for a 6th level spell slot, but if you have an encounter that you have a 6th level spell slot left for and just want to win, Wall of Thorns does a great job of winning that encounter just by casting one spell and not having to spend any other resources. So all of these are very useful. Sunbeam is also pretty useful in some encounters, though usually not worth a 6th level spell slot compared to upcasting Conjure Elemental, Hero's Feast, or Wall of Thorns, but does have some use if radiant damage is particularly preferred for an encounter. For this spell level, I'm going to recommend just preparing Wall of Thorns and Hero's Feast. Druid is going to have some of the highest priority on your spell slot refresh items that you'll get in the later game, so the ability to cast 3 different 6th level spells in the game is going in a single day is fairly likely to fall to your Druid, and they make some of the best use of those. So cast an Elemental, use Hero's Feast, and cast Wall of Thorns in whatever the most difficult encounter is, and your Druid will be overpowering your enemies very easily. So you have some of the strongest early game, some of the strongest mid game, and some of the strongest late game. That's why Star Druid's so great. They have no weak points throughout the entire build. Finally, at character level 12, we get our last feat, and of course the feat that we're going to take is an ability score improvement to boost our wisdom to the maximum. If you have additional feats, like if you're using a mod, for example, like the Feats at Even Levels mod, which I recommend because it's kind of fun, there's a couple other feats that we can benefit from, though fewer than other characters, but something like because we don't really need Warcaster, Advantage is much less useful when you can't roll below a 10 anyways. So while most spellcasters would take Warcaster, we don't need that as badly here. Some other good options, though, are you can take Resilient for Constitution to gain proficiency in con saves and be even better at maintaining concentration on spells. Lucky makes this already vastly consistent character even more consistent, and Mobile is just a pretty nice feat that just boosts your movement speed, which any character can make great use of also. So there's some good options if you've got extra feats, though this character is very, very happy to just take Alert and 2 ability score improvements. We don't need any other feats, so it's very self-sufficient, one of the great things about this character. Finally, for our last spell preparation, if you're stuck for a spell to pick, I recommend Freedom of Movement. There's a lot of enemies that stun in the late game, and this gives your character a great panic button to break an ally out of that stun and prevent you from losing a combat that could snowball against you if you don't have a way to deal with that. Alright, my friends, that is the Star Druid, but of course we can make this character more powerful with items, so let's talk about those. 4 items for this character. We're one of the best users of 2 of the best item sets and best item combinations in the game, and we also get the extreme versatility of the character as a whole applied to our item set as well. There's a lot of different items that we can take, all of which will benefit this character. While you don't need to use these specific combinations, they're very good, so they're very helpful for this character, but the Star Druid will also be very effective, even with minimal or no items at all. So if you you have other party members that need specific items more, the Star Druid does not need items in order to be efficient. So you can have this character either use some of the more powerful items in the game, and they'll do so incredibly effectively, or take a backseat to your other characters, and they will still provide tremendous value. Firstly, let's take a look at the specific item combinations that this character uses so well. The first of these is the buff on heal item set. The Hellrider's Pride, which provides Blade Ward every time we heal an ally. The Whispering Promise, which provides Bless whenever we heal an ally, and the Boots of Aid and Comfort, which add 3 temp HP whenever we heal an ally. Since this character is so good at healing with Chalice healing, we're very, very good at passing out these buffs in the early game, and all your allies taking half damage and having the effect of Bless, so they're significantly better at actually succeeding on all of their attack rolls and saving throws, means that this character provides a huge amount of support to the party members, to your whole party in the early game. So this is the set that I would recommend for at least Act 1, and you can continue to use the buff on heal item sets all game if you want to for this character. The other specific item set that is so powerful for this character, that I would recommend as well, is the Radiating Orb and Reverberation item set. The Luminous Armor, Boots of Stormy Clamor, Gloves of Belligerent Skies, Callous Glow Ring, and Coruscation Ring let you, with the Luminous Armor and Coruscation Ring, apply Radiating Orb whenever you hit an enemy with a spell effect, and the Callous that does radiant damage, and the Callous Glow Ring adds radiant damage to all of your spells. So you're applying stacks of Radiating Orb with your spells, and remember, we have radiant damage from our Guiding Bolts, whether those be the ones we actually cast or from our star maps, and we have radiant damage from our bonus actions with Dragon Breath. Dragon Breath does count as a spell, so works with all of these effects that trigger specifically off of spells. Archer form also does radiant damage, so it works very well with those. In combination with that, we have the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, which add reverberation when we do radiant damage, and the Boots of Stormy Clamor, which add reverberation when we inflict a condition, which Radiating Orb counts as, so we can stack up these extremely powerful debuffs on enemies very quickly. It's very similar to how you would build a cleric, though clerics have spirit guardians to apply these passively. We need to use our action and bonus action for doing so, but we stack them even faster than a cleric does because we have both an action and bonus action to add radiant damage to an enemy and apply these effects. So in the late game, this character becomes an extremely powerful debuffer, both with every bonus action and with every spell cast. In addition to that, we are going to want items that increase our spell save DCs. So items like the Fistbreaker Helm that give you an additional bonus to your spell save DC are very powerful for this character and will let you lock down enemies with your powerful crowd control effects even more easily. For Shield, I recommend Ketheric's Shield for the same reason, because that boosts your spell save DC. And since we took Alert, we don't need the Sentinel Shield or anything like that for initiative, so this character can benefit a lot from that as well. We also can benefit from any way to refresh our spell slots. So Marka Heshkir gives us a huge bonus because we can refresh our spell slot. And this character is maybe the best Marka Heshkir user in the game other than a Tempest Cleric, because refreshing our level 6 spell slot is so valuable because our level 6 spells are so impactful as a druid. And we have easy ways to double the lightning damage from Lightning Marka Heshkir because we have Create Water available to us, so we can get an enemy wet and then blast them with the Short Rest Chain Lightning from Marka Heshkir. And because Archer form is an attack roll, it uses the lightning charges that we generate. So Marka Heshkir actually works in, when set to lightning form, works in every possible way for this character. In the early game, I already mentioned Torch as a notable weapon because you can use Shillelagh on it and it will do a significant amount of damage for the early game. It's already more damage than a greatsword if you're just bonking enemies with it, so that's a great early game option. Then you're just going to want to use whatever staff you have that increases your spell save DCs, because this is primarily a spellcasting character. For armor, if you're not using the Luminous Armor, you're going to want one of the medium armors with uncapped dexterity bonus, like the Yuan-Ti Scale Mail. These just will give you the highest AC. The Armor of Agility is the best of these in the end game. It increases your saving throws even further, which includes your concentration save to make you even better at never failing concentration checks. Finally, a couple other notable items for this character. The Boots of Striding. Whenever you're concentrating on a spell, the Boots of Striding prevent you from being knocked prone or moved around, we're almost always going to be concentrating on a spell, and since we basically can't fail concentration saves, the only way we lose concentration on spells is by being knocked prone. The Boots of Striding prevent that entirely, so it's a great item. The Vital Conduit boots also give you 8 temp HP whenever you cast a spell that requires concentration, which includes cantrips. We have some concentration-based cantrips in the form of Guidance and Resistance, so we basically just get 8 more hit points with the Vital Conduit boots, and then can refresh those when we lose them in combat. Another very important item for this character is some way to have Misty Step, so the Amulet of Misty Step or the Disintegrating Nightwalkers should definitely go on this character because we don't get access to it naturally, and pretty much every character wants Misty Step as a panic button for Honor Mode. And a defensive cloak like the Cloak of Displacement will help keep you alive and mean even less damage that you're taking. When enemies have disadvantage on their attack rolls, we have a shield and medium armor, so our armor class is not bad, or can even be quite good if we're using the Armor of Agility and other boosts to our armor class. And then disadvantage on attack rolls means that this character is deceptively tanky for a pure spellcaster. We get decent hit points as a druid, and great armor proficiencies so we can stay alive much more easily. We can also boost our defensive capabilities with the Cosmic Omens in order to make ourselves even better at succeeding on, or make enemies worse at hitting us with their attacks. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Star Druid, and I hope that it helps you in your Honor Mode runs. I think that this is the most fun and one of the more powerful of the new subclasses added. I think that Star Druid is just an absolute blast to use. It's great at every level and goes in any party, so you can always gain value from it, and I just think that's awesome. As always, of course, if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit the like button. Helps me out with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And if you've really enjoyed the video, then of course I appreciate it if you choose to show your support by leaving a super thanks or becoming a channel member. Although super thanks is a silly word, it does mean a lot to me when people choose to do that. As always, of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Thanks for watching, my friends, and I'll catch you next time.